I'm Kyle.
I'm Jayansh.
I'm Monet.
And we're going to be talking about loan default detection. So just to take a look through the process map. So the first thing that we did here is we formed our hypothesis. Then we did a little bit of data cleansing on our data set, where we prepared our data for analysis by factoring some strings, removing some errors, and converting our values into usable formats. Then we did some association analysis on these variables. So using the visualizations and summarization techniques to understand the association between our main variable here, which is loan default, and some indicator variables. Then we performed some uncertainty analysis to understand the uncertainty surrounding these associations. And then lastly, we built a model using a logistic regression technique. So a bit of background on our data set. So our data set was from Kaggle, called Credit and Loan Dataset. It contained 122 variables, but we kept 21 that we believed to contribute to our analysis and research. And the purpose of this Kaggle dataset was to understand what factors are strong indicators of loan default, which is specifically helpful in risk analysis in the banking and financial sectors. So the overarching research question here is, which factors contribute to loan default? So we can do some association and uncertainty analysis, and we're going to do it on 4 variables here today. So the first one we're looking at is years employed and loan defaulting. So essentially, does having a greater amount of service years at your current employer, meaning stability in your job, impact whether a person will or will not default on their loan? So our variable here is how many days before the application the person started their employment at their current job. This was originally in days. We converted this to years. And our analysis here will be numeric X and categorical Y. And so now we can do some summarization. So on the left here, we have a histogram of our distribution of current of years in current employment, where we can see the red line here indicates the median years of someone who didn't default on their loan. And the blue line here indicates the median years of someone who did default on their loan. And so we can break this down by default and no default status in this box plot on the right over here. And we see those that did not default, the median is about 4.63, and those who did default was about 3.37. That's measured in years. And we also see we have a bunch of outliers here, especially greater than about 20 or 15 years for those who've been in their profile, job profile for a long time. So now we can quantify uncertainty around this this observation. So through permutation testing, essentially we can display the null distribution of years employed, where we took default minus no default status. And so using a sample statistic here of the median difference in years employed, where our original observed statistic is that those who did not default worked in their current job profile for about 1.7 more years than those who didn't. And so through this permutation testing, we see that our p-value is 0, so we can reject our null hypothesis that years employed of those without loan defaults and no loan defaults are not the same.
All right, for the next variable, we looked at age with the question of, does age impact whether a person will default or not on their loan? We looked at the age variable, which was originally in days but converted to years. And this is a bivariate analysis of looking at a numeric X and categorical Y. So to summarize the age variable, we looked at the distribution of age. And in this histogram, you can see the blue line shows the mean age for those who defaulted, and then the red shows the mean age for those who did not. So you can see that the average age is like greater for those who didn't default. And then looking at the box plot, you can see by splitting up to those who did default and those who did not, it's not too surprising that the mean age for those in both the categories are like the overall average age of the population. And then you can also see that the age for those who did not default is slightly higher than the age range for those who did default. And then to quantify the uncertainty, we used permutation testing with the null hypothesis of age distribution of those who had a loan default and did not are the same, and then the alternative was that they are not the same. And we found out that the observed statistic was the mean difference in age is -3.4, and the p-value of 0, which helps us conclude that age distribution for those who did default and did not are not the same. And then for the next variable, we looked at gender with a research question of does gender impact whether a person will default or not, looking at male and female, or male or female, with a bivariate analysis of a categorical X and categorical Y. To summarize, we looked at this stack bar plot of those who defaulted by gender, and you can see from the proportion, there's a greater number of females, or greater proportion of females who did not default, and then there are more males who had who defaulted on their loan. And then to quantify the uncertainty, we use hypothesis testing. Looking at the null distribution of the defaults, you can see that the observed statistic for the probabilities of male and female who defaulted is 0.03. And then the p-value was less than 0.05. So we concluded that we can reject the null hypothesis and conclude that this data is in favor of the probability of male defaulting is greater than the probability of females defaulting. Wait, Jay, you're muted.
I was really hoping we're gonna nail that this go. Fuck. So our final kind of analysis was understanding the association between where the client lives and how the the financial institution rates the living scenario, and understanding that association with the loan default. And so this kind of analysis is a bivariate analysis with a categorical X and categorical Y. So quite intuitively, we can see that, just based on the stack bar plot, people who are rated low in terms of where they live are those who have the highest probabilities of defaulting. And we also ended up studying the uncertainty involved with this kind of association. And so basically, we did two hypothesis tests comparing people who were rated low in terms of their living region with the comparing those with the higher ones and the lower with the medium ones. And so our null hypothesis was that the rating of those with loan default and no loan default are the same. And so for this, the observed statistic was 0.60 and 0.63 for the two comparisons, and the p-value was 0 for both comparisons. So we actually did end up just rejecting the null hypothesis in favor of the alternative that people who are rated low actually have a higher probability of default than those who are rated higher. The final step of our model was just making a regression model using the logistic regression technique. And we basically modeled the log odds on a variety of variables, which were age, gender, years employed, the total income, the goods price for which the loan was being asked for, and the dummies for the living rate, the region rating where these people live. And finally, moving on to the estimates. So we just understanding the direction of association, we can see that the region, the age, and the duration of the employment at the current employer negatively affect the probability of loan default, whereas being male positively affects the probability of loan default. And finally, just talking about the model evaluation metrics, the accuracy for our model was about 50%, which means that the model estimated the right label 50% of the times. And we also do realize that this is not the most accurate model. We did end up, trying to increase the accuracy just by bootstrapping, changing decision thresholds, and next slide. And just so the summary of the model, the final conclusion would just be that people who are male, younger, and have a lower region rating, and people who've been employed for a shorter time at the current employer are those who are likely to default on their loan. Thank you.